Jim, since you've been in the JUCO game the longest, why don't you give people an overview of the structure of junior college volleyball and how it kind of relates to what the NCAA structure that people are probably a little bit more familiar with?
For the most part, the NJCAA, there are 3 organizations for 2-year colleges. 2 of them I have zero knowledge on. That's the Northwest Athletic Association, which covers Oregon and Washington. And then California has its own Community College Athletic Association, which I think is the 3C2A, the California Community College Athletic Association.
Yeah.
For everybody else, it's the NJCAA. And it is set up in general to be parallel to the NCAA. So NCAA has 3 divisions. So does community college ball. D1 community colleges, they have full scholarships. They can pay for everything. I think the limit's 15 that for some schools, up to 15.
14.
14, sorry. Mm-hmm. D2 is the same, up to 14, but we're not allowed to pay for housing expenses. Division 3 is not allowed scholarships. They provide only need and academic money between the 3 divisions. The schedules are generally, it's a fall sport. We start earlier, we end earlier than NCAA. So we are eligible to start on August 1st, and the season goes through the weekend before Thanksgiving, presuming everything has gone well. If it hasn't, it ends the first weekend of November. Those years suck. So that's really the basis of the seasons. In terms of other differences, it's really about staffing. I have an assistant, and we do everything. There's not really a secretary. There's no strength coach, travel coordinator, no one to go out. We do everything. Fundraising, the works. It's me, Tiffany, and us against the world, which is a great deal different than your Big Ten schools with multiple assistants and graduate assistants and volunteer assistants and director of volleyball operations and a secretary and a booster department and all that. It's interesting. The other one, and then Aleah can see if I missed anything. Most of the time, D1 schools, when you think about it with the scholarships and having like 12 of them over the course of 4 years, you're really recruiting about 3 kids a year as an average. With a 2-year college, you've got 12 kids, 14 kids, divided by 2, you're signing 6 or 7 every year. And with the complicating factor of you're trying to bring in those 6 or 7 kids, and you're also trying to place the 6 or 7 sophomores with the 4-year schools, so that you're involved with bringing kids in and also moving them onwards, so that it's very interesting in the recruiting process. While you're bringing people in, you're kind of also shoving people out the door.
I would agree.
Yeah.
You didn't miss anything, Jim. That was perfect.
So, did I hit that, Aleah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Jim and I were talking about this a little bit before we kind of, I guess, came on air, so to speak. But one of the things that people kind of need to realize about where JUCO fits in the competitive landscape is kind of all over the place. The top teams in JUCO are very, very good teams. The bottom teams in JUCO are very, very, very bad teams, just like in the NCAA. I should know because I coached JUCO in New England. There were some bad teams, and we didn't start. I mean, I was interested to hear you say that start August 1st. We didn't start on August 1st. I think we started roughly September 1st. So it was always amazing when we would go and look at the national results and see that the teams had already played 20 matches by the time we played our first one, and going, how in the world is that possible? You know.
Yeah.
Now I know. But, you know, it's just like with Eddie, probably in a lot of ways similar to Division III and Division II to a degree. in terms of regionalization and being quite a bit reflective of the strength of your region in volleyball terms, showing up at the college level as well, I would say. Do you agree?
I think Aleah could tell you now that she's down there in Texas about the strength of D1 JUCO ball in Texas. I think the Rocky Mountain area, you've got that with southern Idaho, western Nebraska. You even call Iowa Western in with that. The Texas schools, and then Miami-Dade. The Midwest is where you've got the concentration of Division II. That between Kansas and Illinois, Arizona just won a national title. It's the first one not won by Kansas or Illinois in like 7 years, something like that. So that the talent, depending on the level, is kind of varied. And I should mention D3 is pretty strong in Wisconsin, Chicago with like Harper College, and then the Minnesota schools. Not to mention Owens, which is Northwest Ohio, and won the national title this past year.
Yeah, the regionally for the Division I JUCOs, Texas is very strong, like Jim said, and then you've got the Florida schools. There's just not as many in the Midwest because of the Division II junior colleges that are very strong. So it is interesting how the regions across the country are defined on the division that you're in.
Yeah, when I was coaching New England, I think the majority of the schools were Division II. There might have been one Division III school, but I don't think there were any Division I's at all. And it seemed like in the Northeast generally, I think Genesee was kind of the strong program in New York. There was Delaware Tech. I think it was the other one, kind of a Northeast regional, was a strong team. I think those were all D2. But yeah, I always used to hear about Miami-Dade and how strong they were, and Idaho. Southern Idaho was definitely another one. So it's an interesting situation. Jim, you've been doing this the longest. So what's your overall background?
Yeah, I'm old. I actually had a weird start to volleyball. I had never seen volleyball played. Found a girl that I liked in graduate school, and it was 50 cents a ticket to go watch Illinois play the University of Iowa. So $1 for a date, great. I'm in grad school. I've got no money. That's cheap. And I despise the University of Iowa, so watching them get pummeled in any sport is great. And they were playing in Kenny Hall, which is a high school gymnasium at the time. It was 1989. And the speaker system didn't work, so you couldn't understand the names. So like Laura Bush was Roar Rouge, like that. You couldn't understand it. They broke fire code. The balcony was full. There was no air conditioning. And I was like, wow, this is really great. And started going back and learning the rules by observation. Then got hired to do stats for Illinois, because I loved baseball stats. I love math. And from there, I got a job as a volunteer assistant at Iowa State while I was teaching there, and then spent 3 years working for Jim Stone at Ohio State. And along the way, I met a different girl and fell in love and got stupid and got married and moved to Illinois, coached high school and club here, and then got into coaching 2-year colleges with a couple years out in Kansas at Allen County Community College before moving to Lincoln Land. So I've been doing 2-year college ball now since 2004. So this is like, oh my God, 17 years.
Now, Aleah, this has been your first season, so you're going into year number 2. And you've been coaching in 4-year schools prior to that. So why don't you let people know that kind of history?
Yeah. Yes, so I got to play at a 4-year, transferred. I was a Division I NCAA and then transferred to the NAI. I still have a couple different backgrounds with the 4-year schools. Coached at the graduate level at a 4-year school, and then same, I guess it's 6-7 years 4-year, and then got the opportunity to be 2-year. And it's the reverse of most JUCO go up to 4-year, and so the reverse for me has been really beneficial because, like Jim mentioned, while we're busy recruiting half of our team every year, we're also busy recruiting half of our team every year, the reverse, and trying to get them placed. And some years that's easier than others, or you have all 7, 8 kids that want to go play, and then some years you have 4 or 5. But that 2-year route, it's been a blessing on the coaching side, getting to see the development and actually getting to have the hands-on to do that, and being from the 4-year, those aspects of 2-year schools that not all programs either have the ability to do or realize the importance. I'm able to then implement that and really hopefully help prepare these girls be ready for a 4-year, because it is a different life than a 2-year.
So what was the biggest adjustment for you going from coaching at a 4 to coaching at a 2?
I had 18 and 19-year-olds. We didn't have anybody that was 20. And coming from the NAI specifically, there were years we had 20, players that were 22 or 23. And you make no mistake that a 23-year-old is more mature, 99 out of 10 times. And so the thought processes of 18 and 19-year-olds, you repeat yourself a lot more. And you just have to learn the communication style is just a little different, because all of mine specifically were under 20. So that was a big adjustment, having all freshmen. Whenever maybe other years we recruited heavy JUCO. So we had kids for 2 years. So they're juniors and seniors, and we might have 1 or 2 freshmen, and then it was flip-flopped. I had 7 freshmen and 7 sophomores. So that age difference was different. And thankfully I had coaches from other sports that helped navigate that just a little bit, because they also had been a part of 4-year programs. And they said, this is going to be your biggest adjustment right off the bat, aside from being hired like July 28th. So.
Yeah, the woman I coached for when I was coaching at JUCO, she described, freshmen as basically 13th graders. So you're constantly working with a large new batch of 13th graders. Yep,
I like that. Well, and my background, my education is early childhood, and so at early childhood they're starting just to learn life. They have to learn expectations of school and all of those things. Well, freshmen and sophomores are learning a whole new way of life, leaving high school, and the friends and the families that they've been around for, like you said, 12 years, because they're going into 13th grade. It's that same, the psychological stuff that they're going through, and it might be different because they're not 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, but they're still going through a developmental stage. And I think that has helped identify that in the junior college level. That was a big thing, that it's just an adjustment for everybody. No matter how independent they are, no matter how talented they are in the court, those adjustments are real.
Okay. Now, this question is for both of you. Who is the primary population that you're recruiting from to bring kids into a JUCO? So who are your likely candidates? Jim, you're muted. I could see you talking. There you go.
Oh, that's my bad. I said ladies first. Aleah can answer it.
Oh, well, I'm still trying to, each year, I think by maybe year 4, I'll have a more concrete answer, but kind of a variety. So like Jim said, having 14 official available, letter of intents, say, I'm gonna always look at those opportunities from those Division I schools, Division II schools that maybe it wasn't the right fit for them. They were a walk-on. They were a redshirt. They got hurt. Maybe the academics were more difficult. I want to be able to be an option for many of those schools. And so part of the roster is going to be there. Part of the roster is going to be your high school seniors that want a 2-year experience, because there are a lot of those. Maybe academically they want more focus. Maybe they need to get 2 years covered, or at a cheaper expense than going to a 4-year school. So part of the roster is going to be there. Part of the roster is going to be I want to brag on my kids. I have a handful of 4.0 out of high school kids. And I know there's this misconception that junior college kids maybe aren't academically inclined, but I do have those. It's the best fit for them. So I'm going to have some of my roster, they're trying to figure out what's their best fit for their next 2 years or next 3 years. And then I do have the ability to recruit internationally. And so I will have a few on the roster with the international side. I want the diversity of that. So I want people from close to home. I want people far away from home. And then I do want the international flair to the roster as well. So I don't know if that kind of answers how the recruiting, like what I'm looking for. It's, like I said, it's year one. So ask me next year and I might have a totally different answer, you know?
I tend to have, well, I'll whip out a big word, an iconoclastic point of view on this. I am not happy with the way recruiting is set up and the emphasis on club all the time. And where I've had a great deal of success actually is going to high school matches. And I look for those kids that are too busy to play club, don't have the money to play club for the costs. So that if I see that kid is great at volleyball and is all-state at basketball and all-state at softball, I'm on that kid. I do not care if they played club or not, because I kind of trust my ability to teach the sport, but I can't teach you to be 5'11" and all-state in 3 sports. So that some of our best success, some of our All-Americans have been kids that never played club. But one of the kids, when we did skill testing, she came in, oh my God, she came in late from registering for classes. We had a Vertex set up, dressed in khakis and a polo shirt and like penny loafers or whatever non-tennis shoes she had on. She walks over, 3-step approaches, 9'9". What the crap? No, she was already on the team at that point, but that's why. That's a kid that wouldn't have been seen because she never played club. And so that's the sort of kid I'll target. I think in general with community colleges, you see a lot of kids recruited that they're not Division I athletes, so that they're below that level, but the Division II, Division III, or NAIA are not giving them a full financial package so that they have costs. And at Lincoln Land, if I don't give a scholarship to a kid, tuition is $3,000 for the year. So that you're out $3,000. That's it. When you look at the packages for a lot of schools, it's going to be more than that. So the financial side of things comes in for a whole lot of kids with the recruiting process. And I think that becomes important. Otherwise, because of the restrictions my institution has on our scholarships, for the most part, I focus on Illinois. I'm allowed 2 out-of-state scholarships. And depending on the year, we've had kids from like Missouri. This next year, we're going to have, we've had a couple internationals in the past. We're going to have another international this year for the reason that Aleah mentioned with the diversity and the experience. I have a bunch of farm kids that they don't know where places are in the world. Had one, when we had a kid from Australia back in 2016, and before she arrived, one of the players asked if she was going to be able to adapt to speaking English. And it's like, what? Well, she's from Australia. And it's like, oh boy. We had somebody wondered if she'd ever been to a beach before in Australia. And how is she going to adapt to living in a big country? And it's like, Australia is a continent. What? Mm-hmm. I thought it was an island like Bermuda. And I'm like, oh, no, sweetie. No. It's grande. No. And so what happened was beautiful that that was Marie, and then Bob from Serbia came over and shared a lot of their culture and got it. So I had kids that had never gone anywhere before. They have gone over to Australia to visit. They've made plans to go to Serbia, and they now realize the world is a much bigger and cooler place than Central Illinois.
Yeah. I mean,
on the tangent, sorry.
No, it's all right. I mean, it's kind of part of our job is to help broaden some horizons a bit.
Absolutely.
So, when I coached at Midwestern in Texas, we took the team to Buenos Aires, and I mean, maybe 2 of those kids had ever been outside the country before. Most of them probably had barely been outside of Texas. Now, admittedly, it is Texas, so it's huge, and you kind of understand why you never need to leave. But still, it was definitely an eye-opener. They saw things. Buenos Aires is a big city. Most of them had never, I mean, Dallas is pretty big, but it's not the same sort of thing. So they saw a lot of stuff that they had just never been exposed to. And it, and the prep for it and all that, trying to get the cultural, at least some sort of cultural awareness was really interesting and a lot of fun just watching them go through it and be able to learn from that process. I want to touch on kind of the JUCO to 4-year and also the 4-year to JUCO to 4-year. And Aleah, maybe you could talk a bit to this, especially in that latter case, because I'm guessing you've probably been through it. Because the rules are a little bit different depending on which way you're going. It's fairly straightforward going JUCO to 4-year, but when you bounce back and forth, it gets a little complicated.
So the process, and you have to be careful. Each institution also can throw in their own rules or guidelines with it, not only at the junior college level, but the 4-year, because private and state, so it can get a little dicey. But a lot of the 4 years that go 4-4 have already qualified for that 4-year. So NCAA, whether it was ACT or the categories that they met. So coming back to a 2, then attaining that associates to get back to the 4. And then still having to require, it's not just associates. You've got to have certain hours and certain degree program that allows for those nine hours. And again, every school has so far that I've experienced, and this is year 1 going through it, and there's a lot of other people that have done it for 20 years and can give you a much more detailed answer to that. But they've got to be able to be specified in a degree program, education, psychology, business, something to where not only is that backtrack of the 4-2 back to the 4, they still have to have that concentrated area. Does that answer that or help, I guess?
A little bit. And
like I said, it's straightforward, but at the same time, there's, one of my kids going 4-year is she doesn't have to have, like the school she's able to get admitted, even if she doesn't have, say, 9 or 12 hours in one category. But then I have another who had to, has to take added another class in the spring. So she had a focus on top of the associates. Right.
Yeah, the NCAA's got a whole bunch of different rules in terms of what's a qualifier, what's a partial qualifier, what's a non-qualifier, and it all feeds into what your status will be if you transfer in different ways.
Yep.
Which can be a little bit Byzantine in trying to work
and
out.
I guess that explanation was more the Division I route. Now, to go to Division II, the associates, again, it looks different, and I'm still learning. It's a learning process every day. And I think until I have every situation that I have a kid go through, I'm not going to fully learn and understand it. You learn best by going sometimes. So that's that's the knowledge right now.
All right, Jim,
the best advice you can ever give a kid, the best advice you can give a kid is actually graduate and make sure you've got a good GPA.
Yep.
I think it's a 2.5 and graduate, and you should be safe.
Yeah. And anytime you're flirting with those GPAs, you've got to help encourage those kids. But like associates and an eligible GPA is huge. And if you can get a 3 in front of it, then you are absolutely safe.
Right. Absolutely. Jim, you've probably seen this a bit more often. What does the frequency look like of kids going from the JUCO after their second season straight into the spring semester into a 4-year instead of finishing up?
It doesn't happen very often. In my time doing it, I've had 2 athletes do it because of the combination of grades that they had to have coming into my program, the grades that they needed to transfer, or the ability to pick up that associates early. It's something that I mention to 4-year coaches on a regular basis, that this kid is academically able to do this depending on your scholarship information or availability at a 4-year school, whether you want her to or not. But that's not always the case. The 2 kids that I did it, that left early are conveniently the 2 kids that are the best 2 kids in program history. and one went to play D1. One went to some loser school where she played for Aleah Hayes. So,
and she was an excellent student and player in person.
she was. She graduated earlier with a 4.0.
Not was, still is. Yep.
Oh my God, she's going to graduate with like 2 master's degrees
Yep.
because of the suspended spring season.
Yep, and enjoying Florida at that.
Oh yeah, I hate her. But I think that it's rare, but it's something that you talk about as a 2-year college coach. The biggest part of it is you need to keep the communication open with your athlete. Is that something they're open to, that they want to do, as well as with the 4-year coach? Because some of them want to go through that second spring season with their current teammates. They want to go through the May graduation ceremony and some of that other stuff. It's really up to the kid in the big picture.
And I do think a lot of 4 years would love the semester transfer, but it's that communication side. If we as coaches don't know that for the 4-year, we have to prepare our kids before that fall,
Yep.
that August timeframe. And sometimes we don't have enough time to help get them there, even though it's possible. So that communication is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't been in the situation of trying to look at transfers. You'd love to get them in the spring so you can get them acclimated into your team and, set up in the school. So there's not a lot of transition when it comes August, September. But yeah, unless it's been planned out ahead of time, it's challenging, really challenging. I do want to, I'm going to wind Jim up a little bit here probably because we talked about this in advance. I want to talk a little bit about the foreign recruitment. I know he's got some strong opinions on that. So I'll start with you, Aleah.
Okay.
And let Jim warm himself up. How are you sourcing players? Is kind of the big thing.
The biggest, I'm unique. I know there's a lot of recruiting services that do try to get connected and help and send emails and do their very, very best for their kids to get connected. I was unique in both at my 4-year at Texas Tech and at Columbia College. I had international teammates. And I, through that process, actually still am in touch with most of them. And so many times I have the connections through people. Just very much like I recruit the American players or domestic players, as people say. It might be a coach that I really trust, and I might not know the kid, but I trust the coach, and the coach knows me, and they know what they can handle. And the same goes for a lot of the international students that I've recruited. I've had my players that said, can she handle my expectation in this position? And then my player responds, no, coach. So at least I know from a player's perspective versus a recruiter's perspective, because their job as a recruiter is that to get their kid recruited. And so you don't always get what you really want because that relationship's not there. So there are a lot of different recruiters that, like I said, get connected, but mine have been most through the connections of people. And at the 4-year level, it was through junior colleges, and I worked for a coach that has a lot of connections, and she still does to this day. And when you develop that relationship, that's huge.
All right. Okay, Jim.
I don't really have a rant on international students. I have some on some silly stuff. I hear a lot of coaches refer to their recruiting in Puerto Rico as international recruiting. And I just kind of sit there and just kind of really. Do you know anything about Puerto Rico and the fact it's like roughly American?
They get the Pell, they can apply for all the
Pell money and everything.
Yes,
you
so it's
bet. And it's just like, what the crap? So a lot of it's coaches. Another issue which is related to the organization. Not all coaches play by the rules. There are a lot of shenanigans that are available for providing extra benefits for athletes across all sports. And I think this is, I don't think Aleah has to deal with this. It's D1 because the scholarships can cover everything.
Right.
But with D2, you're not allowed to provide the housing. There are certain things you're not allowed to provide. It's why in 16 years of doing this at Lincoln Land and all that, I've had 2 international athletes because they have to have the financial guarantees. They have to be able to prove that they pay the housing and take care of all that. there are schools that, for the sake of winning on the court, abuse the idea of student athletes, that they are not really student athletes. They are given easy course loads, easy classes like math for plants, breathing made easy, because they may be a 6'5" left-handed setter hitter that was libero on their nation's on their national team. That is not what the purpose of college athletics is for. It is all about excellence. It is about getting that education. That's what's actually important, because the volleyballs, the next 4 years of their lives, the education is 80 years.
Ever.
And so bringing in mercenaries for that 1 year only is wrong. To provide them unfair benefits does a disservice to all the coaches doing things correctly. And that's unacceptable. My end of things, yeah, I do stuff right. We've lost kids because I won't pay their housing. I know where they went. I know when we play against them. But I sleep well at night knowing that I didn't break a rule.
Exactly.
So, but that's not really an international thing. That's domestic recruiting as well.
Yeah.
It's not like the NJCA has a 1,000-page manual on stuff. It's got very few rules.
Yep.
They're not hard to follow.
This is true.
Nope.
So follow them. Why cheat to win? Do it the right way.
What's one thing we say all the time is, you do it right. If you know how you do it, then you're good to go. And and you can sleep well at night, and you did your best at what you were given and what you were allowed, and you chased after your goal. And sometimes you don't get it, but you did it, and you gave it your best effort the right way.
Yeah. Yep. Is it the case that a lot of the internationals are one and done, or do most of them go through two?
Most will go 2 seasons. Whether they graduate after those 2 years is a different issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be a good way to say it.
But they're very conveniently eligible for both years they can play volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from what I've seen, it looks like a lot of them view it as an entree into being able to play at a 4-year school. Down the line.
And the opportunity to get here, a lot try in that first semester, and then December they go home for Christmas, and they might not get back on a plane. So that might be a case where you get the 1 year, because it's just, I'm home, I'm with family. Yeah, I'm not getting back on. So you do take that risk every time.
Yeah, there's one other thing with internationals, and I think this is important too. We lump all internationals into just international, and the culture differences between Nigeria, Serbia, Brazil, Argentina, China, Australia, the cultural differences are immense. That they're not all the same economic background, social background, cultural background. And they all behave differently. And really, each nation and how you react with them is a unique experience. You can't treat a Serbian athlete like an Italian athlete, like a French. They're all different countries. They all have different rules and expectations, which makes it a little challenging, but also a lot of fun to learn stuff.
Absolutely.
So.
Okay, good. Just a quick rules question. Are you guys allowed to do tryouts or no?
Okay. The answer is I'm going to go into politics someday. The answer is it depends, or maybe. In Illinois, yes, we can do tryouts, 1 per athlete. But the recommendation I would have for coaches or athletes is always check your state high school association rules, because like in Illinois, you're not supposed to try out until after you've completed your senior year of eligibility. So you're not supposed to go between junior and senior year to do this. You're supposed to be done. You're allowed 1 all-star game. If you do more than that, you start risking your eligibility in other sports. So that's why I say it depends. Your best bet is check your high school association rules and then check with the college coach in question. And if you're not sure about that answer, contact a second college coach and see what they say. Because if their answers are both the same, chances are it's legit. You get different answers, somebody's fibbing you.
Yeah, in the NCAA, bizarrely, D2 schools are allowed to do tryouts, but D3 schools are not allowed to do tryouts, and neither are D1. I don't know why that makes sense. You would think that at least the D3s could do tryouts, if not the D1s, but, you know, there's a lot of stuff about the NCAA rules that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense these days.
Then you get the other thing is, we talk tryouts, but what about an open gym or open volleyball held in your facility? Is that a tryout, or is that just anybody showed up to play?
Depends on whether the coach is controlling things or not.
Well, letter of the law and spirit of the law.
Yeah, exactly. All right. We sort of kind of touched on dealing with the kind of the nature of the players that you've got in terms of you're bringing in a bunch of players on the one hand and shoving a bunch of them out the door on the other hand. And there is the element at the 2-year level where you don't have the players for very long. I mean, 2 seasons, hopefully, you know, assuming they come back after the first one. And 1 spring, maybe 2, depending on their mentality, if they want to, you know, stay involved and stuff in that second one. So what's that like in terms of just how you have to think about player development?
This is when it's more tough for Aleah since she's only got the 1 year in. She hasn't.
Yep.
She needs about 1 more year to figure out.
Yep.
The like most things in life, there's good and there's bad with the 2 years. You only get to keep or develop those kids for 2 years, and at the end of those 2 years, you find, oh man, I wish I had them 2 more years. I suspect 4-year coaches are that way with their senior years. It's like, wow, you were just getting interesting. Wish you could play another a 5th and 6th year. But the advantage is that sometimes you recruit kids that are a pain in the butt. You know, putting it nicely. They're only around for 2 years, so you're not stuck with a headache for 4 years. It's 2 years, and then they're gone. So you lose the good kids quickly, but you lose your mistakes recruiting quickly as well.
On the back end, like 4-year, getting the JUCO kids, I know there's times where that having the extra year for development in a system would be super beneficial. But then, like Jim said, sometimes you have kids and they're not maybe the same kid that you were recruiting, or the experiences they had, or it just wasn't the right fit. And so that's where the benefit of 2 years is nice for both parties. Because usually if it's a coach, it's also the player, you know, feels something or has reciprocates it.
Sure. All right. Let's look at things from a training perspective, because you're basically turning over half or more potentially of your team every single year. So when you start preseason at the beginning of a new year, I'm guessing that there's a lot of teaching, a lot of how do I get these 7 players integrated into the system that I've got. So where are you tending to focus your time during preseason?
Like Jim said, I mean, 1 year, and I literally was introduced and on campus July 28th, and we start August 1st. So this last year's preseason and 2-a-days and just the whole process is going to look completely different than this upcoming year, because the kids, you know, for a whole summer didn't have a coach. So I was processing and going through different things, getting us together, and the skills side was truly on the back end. Like we were focusing on so many other things before we focused in on the court. And I still believe in that type of team development. Of course, skills are important, and that's what you do on the court. But girls we're tricky, and we're emotional, and we're moody, and we are frustrating, and all of these things. And so we have to learn about each other before we're able pass, set, and swing. And so we'll still focus on that, and then we'll continue the skill development, absolutely. But in the recruiting process, my hope is that they already have something that I'm going to be teaching, or something that makes me think they're, that they catch my eye for that reason, to where getting into the system is easier. I'm not starting from scratch. But then you do have your kids who they're like Jim had, you're in just street clothes and you jump and touch 9-9. I mean, so you might have a little more development there, but you take that kid and you work through it.
Sure.
I tend to kind of do the opposite. We'll jump into the pass hitting and all that, and I worry about the touchy-feely crap later on and let them figure that out on their own. I think that's because I'm a guy. I won't lie. I think that's a completely different approach.
A female coach versus a male coach, absolutely.
Yeah. There have been a couple years it's like, well, did you know that like Aleah wasn't even talking with John and they blocked each other on social media? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. They're on the court. They're playing volleyball. I don't care.
Right.
Let's leave that alone. The other thing that I think is important where I do a little differently is I don't have a system. I think when you have a system in place to start with, you predispose yourself to look at certain people a certain way. So that if I build a team where my system's all about digging the ball and passing, I may ignore that I wouldn't really, but I may ignore that 6'6" kid who only can hit and can't do anything else. So I'm kind of used to teaching everything every year because I just go for the best available talent, and then we'll just all fit it together. And it takes more than the couple weeks of preseason. Usually it takes us until we've played 8 or 9 matches before we start really figuring out lineups and stuff. And I guess I don't know how many games they play down in Texas. We play about 50 matches up here. And so we get a lot of matches. So really that first half of our season, depending on the opponent, because we play some bad teams, it's really about figuring out lineups and getting everybody the playing experience, so that the regular season's really almost a long extended tryout for the playoffs, just as a philosophy there.
Yeah, that's all. We play typically 30 to 40, and the national championship team was 30-0, and so they played as far as they could, and they had 30 matches. But there were some that had up to 45 and 50, like you said.
Jim, are all those matches 5-setters, or is there some tournament style stuff where you're doing 3s?
NJCAA does not recognize best of 3s. Those are all up to 5-setters. And when you play 4, and we've had that happen before, where you play 4 matches Friday and Saturday, and they all go 5 sets. It's a long weekend.
Brutal.
It's also it's why you make sure that you get playing time for more than just your front 6 kids.
Yeah. Well, and it's one thing I remember discussing in another conversation was the idea that with the younger players, the freshman players are used to playing tournament style. So they're used to those long days if they play juniors. If they haven't, then that's a little bit of a different adjustment. Whereas as you go further in your college career, you're further and further away from those tournament experiences. And when you have to play 2 or 3 times a day, it's a wee bit harder on the already broken down body a little bit.
Right.
So I can see the advantage when you're constantly dealing with basically 18 and 19-year-olds. They're just better able to play more frequently like that.
I think the tournament structure with the way NJCAA works causes one other difference compared to D1 and D2, especially for NCAA. The Big Ten's playing on Wednesdays and Saturdays or whatever. You get a practice to focus on that next opponent, to go over the scouting reports. Well, on that Saturday, we may be playing at 1 and 3 and back-to-back. So our scouting report on the second team is going to be, don't serve the libero.
Yeah.
Or, watch the 6'3" kid. She can hit. She's left-handed. That's the scouting report. Go out and play. So it kind of forces you as a coach to develop a philosophy that's focused on your team and forcing the other team to react to you rather than worrying about what they're doing.
Very good. All right, we've got a question from McKaylee. This isn't the one he submitted by email earlier. I'll get to that one in a little bit. So this is a separate one he's put in. He wants to know about redshirting a kid and then obviously having them transfer basically after 2.5 years. Is that something that happens much, if at all?
I think it depends on your scholarship budget, your program, and if you have that ability. I know I've done that, and it's the best interest of the kid, whatever the reason is. And every junior college program, although they might have the max scholarship numbers, because when it comes down to it, it's dollars and cents. Can either the player pay, or can the coach cover it through the scholarship with the school? And some can and some can't. But it's absolutely doable. There are junior college kids who have been in the junior college system for 3 years due to the red shirt.
I've seen red shirts used for a couple reasons. One, for the athletes who are not quite successful academically as a freshman, so they take a red shirt year to get the grades back up so that they can graduate in that third year. I've also seen it with injuries causing it, so that you have to have an injury red shirt. In the case for me of the injury red shirts, I try not to keep them around for that third year. I haven't kept them around for the third year because they're on pace to graduate, and this gives them a chance to go on to their 4-year school, potentially with that extra year of eligibility to use at that other school where they can have their bachelor's and maybe some of their master's paid for. And so I don't want to selfishly keep them around just for my volleyball team when they're spinning their wheels academically.
Okay. Yeah, the thing that for people who might be wondering about, well, if they're going to transfer on, what's that going to do to their eligibility and whatnot, they'll still have, assuming they play out the 2 seasons, they'll still have 2 full seasons at the 4-year level. And if they've only used 5 semesters at the JUCO level, they'll still have 5 semesters left. So they could potentially, if they need it, if they have an injury red shirt or something like that, they still could do 3 seasons, with one being a redshirt year at the 4-year college, if that ends up having to be a circumstance. That's the advantage of being a fall sport instead of a spring sport, or what do you do with the fall semester and try to have to, maybe they got to go part-time or some craziness like that. All right. Feel free, as I said before, if anybody else has got any other questions, go ahead and send them in, and we'll look to address them. The other question that Mick had emailed in before has to do with men's volleyball. Texas, this doesn't exist.
No, you're telling me it's football, baseball.
Yeah. Volleyball is huge for the girls, and it's huge for women in college, but there was, I remember watching the boys division at the Lone Star qualifier, seemingly along with every girl in the gym going to want to watch the boys play. Mm-hmm. But it's they're like on 3 courts or something like that. It's just not that big a thing. Mm-hmm. What about in your case, Jim, in your area of the world, is there any movement to increase participation at the JUCO level for boys volleyball, men's volleyball?
I have had a conversation with 3 different JUCO athletic directors and received very quick responses of no. And I think a lot of that, some of it has to do with budget. The state of Illinois is incompetently managed, so there's not a lot of money running around. And that makes it difficult on athletic departments where we're already doing a lot of fundraising. But then you start running into some complications regarding equal opportunity. So that at Lincoln Land, they're very careful about the balance and making sure there's enough opportunities for female athletes compared to male athletes. If you were to suddenly add a men's volleyball team, given the enrollment rate it's like 50-50 at Lincoln Land, you run the risk of skewing your athletics to 70% male, since we only have 6 sports total. And that means then you're going to have to add a female sport. Now we're adding 2 sports when there's just enough budget for 6. And so it becomes a budget issue, which kind of stinks because I think the men's volleyball would be great. But I think what's happened around here is there's been a massive growth, well, there was up until the pandemic, in Division III volleyball. and being able to play that way. And the pandemic has forced here, one of the schools, Illinois colleges, dropped their men's program that they had just started. I believe Greenville College has reduced theirs to a club team status for the foreseeable future for this. But I think it's all budget related. The interest in Illinois is there. Boys high school volleyball in the St. Louis metro area is fabulous. And, then you've got Chicago. Oh my God. And men's volleyball isn't going to be picked up in this part of the world for JUCO in a long time. I think that if you're going to make headway on that, it's going to be kind of through potentially adding beach volleyball for men and starting it in Florida and the Carolinas. I think that's where it's going to have to come from.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
Junior college programs, unfortunately, we saw it with volleyball just this last year. Schools are cutting programs. They don't, and it comes down to the financial. So if we aren't able to sustain already programs that have been in the NJCAA system for years, I think they're hesitant to add a brand new sport that is growing, and it, in my opinion, would be successful. But like Jim said, it comes down to the dollars and cents, the budget. And, we had a handful in the Florida schools and in the Kansas area that now there's no schools or there's no volleyball programs for this upcoming season. And programs just found out about it. So I think that has an issue, or that causes issue for adding a new sport.
Jim, you brought up the beach side of things. What does that look like? What does that look like on the women's side in terms of developing programs at the 2-year level?
I know that it's growing fast for a lot of the schools, like where it's nice in the spring and all that. I think it's going to be quite a while before it gets really into the schools around here. Some of it's practical nature. Where do you practice when it's 7 degrees out? And the easy answer is to say, well, just practice in the gym. Well, in February and March, you've got basketball, we have one gym. And in February and March, you've got 2 basketball teams that are in the middle of their season, softball and baseball that are in their preseason and the start of theirs, and indoor volleyball, which is able to do its spring season. So you already have 5 teams for a gymnasium that's only available from 1 p.m. on due to classes. So that it becomes a facilities issue as much as anything for a lot of places. Would my kids play beach volleyball? Oh, in a minute, especially if it got them out of spring practice and that they could be competing and playing in the beach in the sun. Totally. I would have a full beach team instantaneously. Mm-hmm. I'd probably also have skin cancer up here, but that's a different story.
All right. We're coming up on the hour, so this is the time to get questions in if you haven't submitted them already. The kind of maybe one final question that I'll throw at you both is, from your perspective, what are the things that you most go, and what are the things that are more frustrating?
I caught none of that, John.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say the same thing. Can you repeat?
Uh-oh. Poor John, frozen in time.
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully. All right. I think I'm
there. We're back.
That's
right.
Better.
Yep. Okay. The question I was asking was, you're obviously going to have different perspectives because of the length of time. But to your current point of involvement at the JUCO level, what are the things that you've most enjoyed, and what are the things that you maybe not so much enjoyed?
I've not been at the JUCO level very long, as we know. So one of the things that I absolutely love is just the hands-on side of development in all areas. So obviously volleyball, but the academic, the emotional, the social, just what it looks like to be a successful student athlete, and really emphasizing both categories, but volleyball is for 4 or 5 years if you're lucky, and then you work the rest of your life, and you can always be involved in volleyball, but it's not a sport yet. I know we're working towards a professional option, but we still have to be able to encourage that side of finding what is it that you're interested in. What area do you really want to study? Why do you want to do these things? Interactions, all of that. I love that side. And teaching is my background. That's what I went to school, my bachelor's and master's with. So I benefit, and I love that side. The side that is just continuing to get used to is we do it all. Like Jim said, we don't have the person for each category, scrolling on social media for ideas, because although that is my generation, I don't have those personal social media platforms. It is not my cup of tea. So I'm trying to learn how to do it when other programs that they have a person for that. But then we are also the people that focus on the academic, the athletic, the training, the strength, all of it. So, and coming from a 4-year, that has been an adjustment because we've had points of contact for most of those areas. So I'm getting to have the full experience, which is wonderful. But it's been the most challenging.
Yeah.
I think the best part about it is something that should be the best part universally for coaches. And that is I get to bring in kids who are 17 or 18 and basically idiots. And I get to watch them grow over the course of 2 years as they go through the process of becoming good adults. And I get to do this every year and see that improvement. And I think that's really the biggest thing. It's great to win on a scoreboard and all that, but I love seeing the improvement and where they wind up. And I think if you ask most coaches, NAIA, NCAA, that those coaches are going to tell you the same thing. My favorite day of the year for volleyball, we can't do this fall, and that's our alumni match. We got like 30, 40 alumni coming back. We have 40-year-olds playing volleyball. One of them this past year was under doctor's orders. She's like, now, Jim, remember, I'm not supposed to dive. And she's like 30. And so she goes diving for a ball, and it's like, hey, you're not supposed to dive. And she said, bite me, Dietz. And it's like, I love that. I love that. And then like the next day, seeing their social media, I can't walk today. Best evening ever. I think that's the greatest thing from this is the relationships you build with young people, helping them become adults. And I sit there, and after doing this for a long time, one of my former players just finished her PhD in nutrition. Another got a senior nutrition position with the Veterans Administration. The one that played for Aleah is working on 2 master's degrees. Oh my gosh, this is incredible. It's so much better than the volleyball.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now the negative side, I have, we're out of time roughly, so I can't rant as much.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I don't care. I won't. I wish that everybody would follow the rules and play fair and play nice. I tend to be idealist and naive that way, and they don't. And it bothers me. And I know somebody put on the chat, what do you do about that? I go to bed at night knowing I did the right thing. Exactly. And that everybody that knows me knows I did the right thing. I think one of the problems I have is the stereotyping. I hear a whole bunch of, well, you're just a JUCO coach. Really? I come and do what I do. That bothers me a great deal. Well, if you knew what you're doing, you would be at D1. No, been there. Don't have to be there. This is something completely different. For the D1 coaches listening that I will throat punch, I don't like you coming up to me and telling me how busy you are and how much work you're putting in. You have 3 assistants, a director of volleyball operations, a secretary, and all that. I do all of that myself, so shut up. That's a very few of them. But you do get that. I've had coaches that the minute they find out, I have had 2 coaches from the Big Ten, the minute they find out that I am only a community college coach, have immediately broken off the conversation, turned their back, and will not acknowledge me again. Really? Really? Because knowledge isn't about the level you're coaching at. I do this because I own a business here. My wife's here. My family's here. That's I guess that's kind of the negative sides of it. But in the big picture, it's fun to rant about those negatives, but they're so outweighed by the positives. I work with an athletic director and in a department where all the coaches feel the same way, where we really do put the kids first in the academics, and it's great to see the success of those kids. It's why I got into education in the first place, was really to help people. And it's not just whether they get good grades or not, but the whole cultural stuff with all of a sudden finding out they want to travel overseas. It's dealing with farm kids versus city kids and learning to live with one another as friends and teammates and just fellow citizens of the world. Well, I went off there. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. Okay, we've actually, while you were ranting, we had a couple of questions come in.
All right. All right.
All right. The first one deals with the career side of things and full-time, part-time, which Jim and I were talking about a little bit before, but obviously we haven't talked about in this context. So, Aleah, you're full-time at Trinity?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you have any other responsibilities, or strictly volleyball?
No, I'm strictly volleyball. And I'm one of the very lucky ones that gets to be full-time and just my sport, especially at the junior college level. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm very blessed.
All right. And Jim, you've obviously indicated that you're part-time with your business that is your full-time work. And yeah, there's a lot in between. There are people that are full-time, maybe with teaching duties or some sort of administrative duties. There are a lot of people who are part-time because they've got full-time jobs.
When I coached out at Allen, coaching was considered 20% of my job. Teaching was 80%. So everything from full-time to completely part-time with no other responsibilities, it exists out there. It's not always teaching jobs. Nearby here, the Lakeland College, their coach is the trio advisor for students. So that you get a lot of advising. I've seen facilities managers, teachers, athletic director, housing. There's a whole lot of stuff. In that regard, it probably runs the same gamut as the jobs D3 coaches have to do.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, the other question is there any pressure to have fundraisers at your college? If so, what kind? Is there a certain amount you need to raise? How much help do you get from players and parents?
For again, it goes to every school, and it's our famous words, it depends. Our athletic department as a program, I don't have to fundraise to function and to be able to go travel and play and recruit and do what I need to do and want to do with that. But as a program in school, there's always constant fundraising. But I would say in comparison to other schools that absolutely have to go and play a volleyball game, I'm not in that category. There are schools like Trinity Valley that do not have to do that. But then there are schools that in order to do what they do, they have to fundraise, not just with the athletic department in school, but as an actual program. And they have to this much money, and maybe it's from camps, maybe not. But there's both sides of it. And I know Jim has a lot more information than I do for that.
Oh, Kirsten probably ranted about the fundraising we have to do.
She's not much for complaining with that stuff.
Well, but she was with USA Volleyball the one summer, so she got to miss all of it. I forgot that.
Okay, so there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So we do a lot of fundraising partially because I think it's important that the girls have nice gear, nice experiences. so that we don't travel in vans. We travel by charter bus. I don't have to hand them $5 and tell them to eat on the value meal. We will eat nice food, give them nice gear. But we will do everything from run camps and tournaments to the concessions day from hell, which is called Karate Saturday, when they hold like a regional Taekwondo championship, have 1,500 people in our gym, and we're running the concession stand for 13 hours, which is, you smell like warm hot dogs for a week after it. But we probably have to fundraise $25,000 a year for what we do. There are times when you have that you feel more like you're a fundraiser who also coaches rather than a coach who has to do fundraising. It's something that I think goes on at a whole lot of schools.
Yeah,
and
4 years as well.
Yeah, and I would tell, people listening when you read this, I think that should be part of the recruiting process for parents and kids. Don't hesitate to ask the school if there's fundraising that's going to have to be done. Most places will be honest about it. I know some that don't tell kids they've got fundraising until they're on campus, and then it's, by the way, the next 2 Saturdays, you're lugging concessions up and down the stands at, I don't know, Nebraska football. What? I didn't sign up for that. Oh, yeah, sorry, we forgot to tell you. And I pulled Nebraska out of the air. It's not actually happening in Nebraska. So if you're listening to this, don't video me and say, oh my God, Nebraska schools. Just a disclaimer.
All right, no problem. All right, that's it for the questions. Any final thoughts, comments, observations, things you want to get out there before we wrap up?
You know what? For coaches, be open-minded about the schools you steer kids to, or what you think you know or what you don't know about the various levels. And that's not just NJCAA. There are some really awesome Division III teams out there, some awesome Division II teams out there, NAIA teams, and community college teams. There are also some community college teams that I think if you gave me a dozen 6th graders, I could beat them. And it runs the gamut. So you shouldn't make presumptions about those teams. Reach out to teams, reach out to coaches, learn more about the NJCAA. Because this stereotype, I think, really hurts volleyball. And it's something that you don't see attached to baseball or basketball especially. Major League Baseball, they do their draft where it's set up, go to a 2-year school, and then we'll draft you out of the 2-year school for kids that want to do that. You look at some of the athletes that have made it big in the NBA, they're 2-year schools, they transfer to 4-year schools. I don't think that happens as much with volleyball for whatever reason.